funny because I'm the one who got Norm on Substack Live, and we should have done. It was like a comedy sketch. It was like a Monty Python sketch with me and Norm getting Norm on Substack app. It's like, huh? The app, huh? Is it on the computer or is it on the phone? Either way, I've added Norm. Hopefully, he says yes. All right. Give me a second and let's see what happens. Norm, I love him. Norm, you joined us.
I'm here.
Welcome. So, Norm, welcome to our Tech Glitch. I was just telling everyone how I got you on Substack app, and you're joining a live conversation. I've been going for 30 minutes because I had multiple tech glitches today. At 1:30 p.m., I was supposed to invite Allison Gill of Mueller-She Report. She's coming out at 4:30 p.m. because she thought it was Pacific time. I accidentally pressed live, and next thing you know, as I'm staring at my camera, we got like 400 people. I'm like, oh shit. So I just pressed play on myself and I've been doing an audible and I told everyone Norm's coming out at 2 p.m. and voila, you're here. Everyone was really excited. And I'll tell you where I'm at right now is I gave people, I tried to connect the dots and I tried to bring the receipts. And I talked about January 6th, what happened. I talked about the violent insurrection that actually was, not the bullshit that MAGA's talking about right now, what's happening in LA. I talked about Donald Trump pardoning all those insurrectionists. I talked about you and me and so many other of the nerd Avengers who show up on Mary Trump's Nerd Avengers warning about Trump's authoritarian impulses, Project 2025. I talked about him quoting Hitler right before the election and saying that he would unleash the National Guard and the military on the enemies from within, about you and me and others said that this is a fascist playbook, and that how everyone who was complicit and bent the knee, whether it's establishment Democrat, corporate law firms, ABC News, CBS News, they would rue the day because fascists come for everyone. And then I was telling him about what actually happened in the last couple of days, which was ICE agents being terrorized, unleashed without warrants and due process, coming up after all these people. And you and me, we've traveled, we've been to LA. This is not all of LA. LA has 10 million people. It's a small red dot, a few folks, and LAPD says, we got this. We got this. And despite LAPD saying we got this, the National Guard was unleashed, made everything worse. Last night, Norm, the LAPD chief said, you all have made it worse, and now you're interfering with our work because the LAPD cannot do its work and respond to actual 9/11 calls because of these friggin' National Guard members who are sitting there unnecessarily terrorizing the people. And I compared it to an arsonist who started the fire, putting fuel in the fire, and now saying, I'm the fireman. And with that, I introduced Norm Ornstein. Norm is an AI. He was a scholar at emeritus AEI. He's written multiple books. Norm, for the past 13 years, folks, has called the radicalization of the Republican Party. He was on top of it, right? He knows these folks, and he says, once Obama was elected and once the Tea Party started, Norm's been on it. He goes, this is going to be the end game. Norm joins me weekly at Mary Trump's Nerd Adventures. It's going to be live tomorrow, I think, at 3 p.m. on Mary Trump's YouTube channel. And Norm has written a fantastic article on the Contrarian that came out today, which is Welcome to the Nihilocracy. What do you call it?
Nihilocracy.
Nihilocracy. Trump is blowing up essential functions in ways that might take decades or longer to restore. So I've called it caucusocracy, a kleptocracy, an oligarchy. We're seeing autocracy. I've called it Trump's reign of terror. Norm, I give it to you. Why do you call it nihilocracy?
So the difference here, Waj, is that other dictators do the same. Trump is using the playbook of Putin and Erdogan and Sisi and so many of the others who are his role models, including Orban. But there's one difference, and that is the other autocrats, for all their viciousness, and some are even more vicious, for all of Trump's retribution to this point, he doesn't throw people out of windows, defenestration like Putin does. He doesn't put yet millions of people as the Chinese and Xi do with the Uyghurs. But they want the trains to run on time.
Proverbially, trains run on time.
They want government to function, basically. They don't want people dying of some pandemic. They don't want people being unable to fly because the planes are going to crash. They don't want people eating things and getting E. coli and dying. And what we're seeing with Trump is a version of nihilism. And that's
Mm,
the reason for nihilocracy, which is you want to blow things up, but you don't want to replace them with something else. This is the antithesis of conservatism. The
mm,
irony that Musk called it the Department of Government Efficiency is that it's not building in any kind of efficiency. It's not like we're taking away the fat from government. It's like we're taking away everything from government and all of these functions: food safety, flying on a plane, uh, dealing with dangerous diseases, having vaccines for a pandemic, having any of the planning you need to do for that purpose. They're blowing it all up, not to mention national security,
right.
uh, which is not their concern at all. So this is different from other dictatorships. But to go back to where you started, Waj, let me just add one other element. I just finished, right before we came on, a conversation on the podcast that I do with David Rothkopf called Words Matter with Miles Taylor,
Mm.
who, as I think most of the people watching and listening know, it has now been officially targeted in an executive order by Trump for treason because he's basically,
Along with Chris Krebs. Tell
along
me
with
about
Chris
Chris Krebs
Krebs,
also.
for speaking out, for defying Trump. And what we're seeing happen in Los Angeles is not about Los Angeles. And frankly, it's not about immigration.
Yep.
It's not about illegal migrants. It's about finding opportunities to bring in the military and create a police state. And when you had Stephen Miller just the other day say what's happening in Los Angeles is an insurrection, that was not a random choice of words. That was specific. They are laying the groundwork, J.D. Vance as well, for invoking the Insurrection Act, which Trump talked about during the campaign, and basically sending police all across the country. We're going to see ICE do the same provocation in other places, almost all blue states and blue
Yep.
cities, trying and doing in your face stuff, going to Home Depots where people are waiting to get jobs to work, going
Absolutely.
to courthouses, and uh, basically going to restaurants where the patrons are going to be outraged that they're pulling people who they know out of the kitchens and trying to get them to overreact so they can bring in first the police, then the ICE people, then the military, and frankly, followed by their vigilante supporters. That's where we're headed. But in the meantime, it's not just the people who are directly involved in this, the people who are losing their lives because they're being snatched off the streets and separated from their kids, or the people who are going to have their heads beaten in while they're protesting this. It's all of us because they're not out to protect public safety or health. They're out to blow the whole thing up. And if Trump isn't a sort of progenitor of all of that, Russell Vought, the head of the Office of Management and Budget, the person who brought us Project 2025, and so many others, Steve Bannon and many others are, they want to blow it all up. And we're going to all suffer along the way.
I mean, it's I had a conversation, Fred Wellman last week, and we were just going through the definitions, right? Is it a caucusocracy? The answer is yes. We're ruled by the dumbest people on earth. I give you Pete Hegseth. We could talk about that and the national insecurity that is caused by Pete Hegseth and Kristi Noem and others and RFK Jr. Is it a kleptocracy, where essentially people are just using the government to rob it and rob all of us blind? Well, yes. Is it an oligarchy? Sure. It's a broligarchy, where you have the world's richest people, right, siphoning off the wealth and then distributing it amongst themselves. Elon Musk, David Sachs, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump. Nihilocracy. Yes, also, you're absolutely correct, because what's so interesting, Norm, and I think it's going to be a sobering point for people. You and I don't just follow the right wing in America, we follow the right wing globally. They crisscross in ideas, they share ideas, they help each other out. But a report came out, it was in the FT. that did this graph that I'm sure you saw, that the MAGA right wing now is more extreme than any other right wing movement in America, in the world, even more than China. It's
Yeah.
neck and neck with Russia, with Russia. And with Russia, I know this might sound strange, Norm, at least with Putin, I'll never call him incompetent. With Trump and all these other individuals, I don't think they're fully there, right? Like, so not only are they arrogant and not only are they greedy and not only are they racist, but there's an incompetence, which is very terrifying to me, especially as they're dismantling our government. And now I'm sure you've heard the reports. They're saying, oops, we fired too many people. We need them back. So I actually don't disagree with you with the nihilocracy, because in addition to the caucusocracy, kleptocracy, oligarchy, it's like destruction for the sake of destruction. It's like a 5-year-old kid who's a sociopath who's been given fireworks is perfectly fine with the village burning down, but he's having a great time.
And it's not, that they did, of course, overreach, and they're saying, oops, but it's not like they want to bring them back because they want to fundamentally restore government functions. The ones they're trying to bring back are ones where they're hoping it won't all collapse in the coming weeks, where they would then be in a weaker place. Then they will go further about the business of dismantling everything that we care about. That's why the first people they wanted to bring back were the ones the idiots fired who were in charge of our nuclear security.
Yep.
But we're not going to see them bring back the scientists and the researchers who are doing the vital work on national security or homeland security. The 100 people fired plus from the National Security Council who are not going to be replaced. They're not going to bring back the people who blew up AID and we've already seen the consequence. Over
300,000 children killed.
Yep, and more to come, because that's continuing to happen. They're not going to bring back experts in the weather service to help us track hurricanes before they actually occur, even as they blow up FEMA. And they're not going to bring back FEMA either as we knew it or in any fundamental way. So and Trump may be just unwitting in this way. Maybe Elon Musk went into this Doge effort with his tech bros who knew nothing about government, actually believing out of ignorance that it was all a bunch of waste and that we could operate without it. Maybe a whole lot of the people who voted for Trump just thought that government doesn't do anything for me without understanding what happens when you lose all your safety net protections. But none of that in the end matters. What matters is the outcome, and the outcome fits every element of all of those ocracies that you mentioned, including nihilocracy.
And someone just mentioned this. There's so many examples, and I'm glad you mentioned the attack on our public health infrastructure, because people aren't mentioning that enough. Folks, RFK Jr. is the director of our health and human services, right? If you just focus on him, that alone is enough for people to be out on the streets, right? This is a man who's promoted eugenics, anti-vax nonsense. They're perfectly fine gutting Medicaid. They have already cut 30% of cancer research in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. Now we have our world's best scientists and doctors who are working on cutting edge research, not only losing their grants, as Norm was saying, now being poached by China, aggressively poached by China. And so that we're having a brain drain, because now they're attacking universities, they're attacking foreign students that come and pay full tuition. So the best and the brightest who come to this country as doctors and engineers, they're not going to come here, folks. Also, speaking about the caucusocracy, the interim head of FEMA, I'm sure you saw this last week. Two FEMA staffers anonymously said they were terrified because they said, well, what's your plan for hurricane season? And the interim acting head of FEMA said, what's hurricane season? He had no idea. And then this one, I'm going to ask Allison about it, but I have to ask you about this. I think this should be bigger news. Could you imagine what would happen if Biden did this? This news that came out that there's a 22-year-old ex-grocer, grocery store assistant and gardener. Folks, I'm going to say this again slowly. 22-year-old ex-gardener and grocery store assistant is now leading U.S. terror prevention. The counter-terror chief is a 22-year-old ex-grocer named Thomas Fugate. Norm, your take.
So the one thing missing from that is that he was a gardener. I just wish he had been a gardener for Four Seasons Landscaping, so we could come full circle. But
He wasn't even the gardener. He was the
that's
gardener's
right.
assistant.
It was yeah. We're seeing this all over the place. Of course, the only people Trump wants in any position of authority are those who, first and foremost, and nothing else matters, are loyal to him and will do anything that he asks. And that includes illegal acts where he will tell them, I'll pardon you. So we really are a government led by ignoramuses at best, but by evil people as well along the way. And let me add a couple of things to what you said, Waj. So they're going after foreign students. It starts with Harvard, but he's talking about basically keeping foreign students out of the country. Now, what happens if that occurs? Foreign students are in every college, including everyone in the South, all the small colleges, and they almost all pay full tuition and fees. That money that's going to these colleges is what subsidizes the ability for the American students to be able to go and get lower tuition, tax breaks, and a full complement of courses. Take away the foreign students. It's not just Harvard, and Harvard will suffer less than a lot of the others because it's got a substantial endowment. If you're a small college with no or little endowment, and you rely heavily on the money that comes in from tuition, you're screwed by this, and it will destroy higher education. If you are Silicon Valley, where a large part of your brain power is the best and brightest who've come here from abroad, lured to go to MIT or Stanford, get electrical engineering and other scientific degrees, and then a whole lot of them stay and go to work for our tech companies. We lose those, and they're going to go back to China, and they're going to go back to other countries, and we lose our predominance in this area. And I will repeat that. Let's say that we end up with the best possible now, which is we endure this somehow for 2 years, and we get a Democratic House that puts a little bit of a check on, and maybe it'll be a backlash big enough that we get a Democratic Senate. And then somehow we have an election in 2028, and we get a Democratic president and a Congress that's willing to work to restore democracy, our economy, our civil society. We're not going to bring back most of those scientists and researchers. We're not going to bring back the crack meteorologists. They will have gone off to do other things. And if they were inclined to come back, they're going to think, if I do this and once again relocate my family and build something back again, who knows what happens in 4 years? If you are a foreign intelligence service from one of our allies, and you know that whatever you give in sensitive information, including sources and methods to the United States now, goes on a direct line to Putin and to our other adversaries. And you also know that a large share of the terrorist plots that we foil are ones that we're able to foil because our allies give us intelligence. Germany says to us, we have infiltrated this terrorist group, and they're planning an attack on the U.S., and we managed to get the people in the U.S. and stop it. That's not going to happen anymore. And even if we end up with a great president and a restoration, they're going to be thinking, whatever I give you now, 4 years from now, it could be back in the hands of the Russians. So we are undercutting ourselves. We're being destroyed from within. This is not just a dictator. It's a dictator whose goal is to destroy America as we know it, and that includes America and its role in the world and the safety that comes from having a web of alliances. This is beyond frightening, and all of that is without the fact that we're moving headlong towards a police state with the Insurrection Act probably not long to follow.
That's my fear as well. And I want to ask you two big questions before you leave. What's the end game? And then I also want to talk about what we can do to resist. And I want to, my take on this is, and I talked to Heather Cox Richardson about this, I think a month and a half ago, and she agreed with me, is America's refusal to confront its two original sins is what has caused ultimately our self-destruction. And the two sins that I mentioned were greed and white supremacy. And we are unable to confront it. We're unable to unroot it. And now it's going to be our undoing. And I agree with you. I think the damage is hopefully not permanent, but, Danielle and I, uh, often say this, Norm, is that we probably won't be alive to see the turnaround, right? The inshallah. But I have kids and you and me are at different stages of our life. May we have long lives, but realistically, you got less years ahead of me than behind me, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But what do we do with the time that we have? And most likely, even though we won't get there, our kids though deserve a better democracy, right? But we have to do our part because people who think that with the magic snap of their fingers in 2026 and 2028 everything will be better, they haven't been paying attention. Like these institutions just don't come back, Norm. These people don't come back. Reputations just don't automatically get better. And speaking of such, people are forgetting that LA is the host city for the World Cup, right? LA is the host city for one of the host cities for the World Cup in 2026 and also Olympics in 2028. Why the F will anyone come to this country? Right, in 2026 or 2028, if they see us treating brown people and black people this way, immigrants this way, foreign students this way, already tourism is down. If you look at tourism to America from every country, it's down, right? Moody downgraded our credit rating. Measles is spiking. Planes are going down, right? It's a complete shit show. So we are destroying ourselves because of the adherence to white supremacy, economic anxiety, cultural anxiety, and greed. And so let's talk about the end game. There's the Russell Vaughts who want white Christian nationalism. There's Stephen Miller who want white supremacy. And there's Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Teal who want the oligarchy. What's the end game if our institutions and the majority do not resist what is the kakistocracy, nihilocracy, kleptocracy, oligarchy?
Of course, first, the answer is we have to find ways to resist. We have to try to make sure that we don't provoke even more violence and military actions along the way. But if everybody gives in, and the way in which we're seeing it happen now, ABC vilely censoring itself, basically, by suspending Terry Moran for what was a perfectly accurate set of observations about Stephen Miller. CBS vilely trying to kowtow to Trump and give him money, protection money, basically, so that Sherry Redstone can complete her deacquisition of Paramount, which includes CBS. What we're seeing from people who are curbing themselves from talking or doing anything because they fear if they do, then there will be retribution. We end up with a nation of sheep, and we end up with the worst case scenario, and that is a country in tatters and disarray, a country that is no longer viewed as a leader in much of anything, and a country where people will not visit. And, as you talk about whether people will come to LA for the World Cup or the Olympics, I saw a story this morning about a young woman here as a tourist, perfectly legally, just had come in the country, picked up by ICE and thrown in a jail mistakenly, as we've seen so many American citizens thrown in jail. You get a few of those stories out there. Why would anybody come to this country as a tourist when you know that you might end up facing a horrible nightmare? And, going back to the foreign students, they contribute significantly to lowering our trade deficits. So Trump gets the opposite of what he says he wants because of the stupidity of these actions. You put the tariffs on steel, raise them to 50%, so you can protect the 90,000 steel workers in America while you fuck over the millions of workers in places like the telephone manufacturers, the automobile manufacturers, the siding people, and all the others who are going to be hurt by those tariffs. We end up with a horrible economy, terrible unemployment, no ability to move forward, no protection against deadly diseases, never knowing actually if the food you're eating is going to lead you to being poisoned to death. That's the problem that we have, and why we all have to find ways to make it clear that we are not accepting these things.
It's because they're gutting any and all regulations. So the FDA,
Yeah,
is going to be disempowered to literally see what, food and drugs that might kill us, right? Or water,
yeah,
for our kids, or the air that we breathe. Norm, I want to ask you this before I let you go, because I know you got to run. Is we're in it now. And we're going to see a military parade, 40 to $50 million of our taxpayer money being wasted to have this fickle Bulgarian rapist have tanks and the military support him, which is what happens in North Korea and Russia, right? And I agree with you that Los Angeles is a test case to militarize blue states and blue cities, and then, God forbid, invoke a type of fake emergency to call the Insurrection Act and then suppress not just people, but also, my fear is, martial law to be
yeah,
implemented, and then undo elections. Right? That's always been my fear, is that he will say that there's an emergency, there's an invasion. They're already using the language: invasion, Alien Edition Act. We need the Alien Edition Act. Invasion, invasion, invasion. Insurrection, Insurrection Act. I'm the president, I'm the commander in chief. It's authority me to protect the United States from threats, foreign and domestic. And as such, I have to declare martial law. I have to suspend and delay the elections. But don't worry, I'll lift it. Just trust me. And then they have complete power and control. They gut the law, gut the judges, gut the Supreme Court, gut, culture, gut the press, gut the universities. And now it's like Hungary on steroids. That's always been my fear. And people say I'm crazy. Am I? I give you LA right now. What can people do to, go ahead. You were on to say something before I was going to say something.
I think you are absolutely on target here. And let's point out that the Supreme Court has unleashed Trump even more than he would have been otherwise, with the reckless and disgraceful and disastrous immunity decision. And I'm not at all sure they can rein that back in. And I'm not at all sure that John Roberts will even try to rein it back in. We have a press corps that basically decided a few weeks ago that the only big story that mattered was the cover up of Joe Biden's mental acuity. And that now is reporting on what's happening in Los Angeles, but as if it were just a typical riot and not a prelude to something worse. We have a Congress that is filled with cultist sheep on the Republican side that will do nothing to try and bring some restraint along the way here, and that in fact will cheerlead as we go along. And I would add just one little side note. I watched a little bit of Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma, who one of the observations that I made is, if it weren't for Marsha Blackburn and Ron Johnson, and especially Tommy Tuberville, he would be the front runner as the dumbest member of the Senate. But you had, if I recall, it was Dana Bash who quoted the head of the Oklahoma Hospital Association, the people from rural hospitals, Republicans in Oklahoma, saying, if you do this with your big, beautiful bill, it's going to devastate the huge numbers of people in Oklahoma, in your state, because they're going to be losing health care and rural hospitals are going to close. And his response was to say it's a bunch of leftists.
Wow.
So that's what we're getting from Republicans in Congress. So the checks and balances that you would hope would be there to keep this from turning into an even worse place. And I would go back also and mention that the culpability for everybody in Congress over decades, we knew a long time ago that there were these emergency laws in place that gave a president a huge amount of authority to be a dictator because they assumed that we wouldn't have a president like this. And they had a lot of time to ameliorate some of this. Put the Insurrection Act aside. The president has the authority to declare an emergency, shut down the internet, take over television and radio networks, take over all of transportation, the airlines, the railroads, the buses, and basically to have almost complete authority here if there's an emergency. And the assumption was no president would do it unless there were a genuine emergency. They didn't bank on a Donald Trump, and our Congresses blithely went along and left those things in place. So there's a lot of blame to go around. But the fact is, we're in a bad spot right now, and people need to find ways, first of all, to give money where it can be useful. I'm going to give some money, for example, to the various organizations that are trying to help make sure that if we do have an election in 2026, that it's not rigged. I'm going to give some money to Miles Taylor's Legal Defense Fund because he's lost his job and has been devastated as not just Trump, but MAGA have come down hard on him and are trying to destroy him and Chris Krebs along the way. We can do that, whatever we can afford or whatever we can manage, find organizations that do matter, and at the same time promote the kinds of media like what Waj is doing with the Left Hook so that we can get messages out there to a broader group of people. And then, to whatever degree you can, find ways to protest, but do it within the boundaries and don't provoke anything, but make it clear that the majority of Americans say that this is wrong and they don't want it.
And, civil disobedience, that was the strategy of a lot of the black leaders because they knew that if they were to engage in violent protests, how that would be spun and used. So they had the cracked skulls. Some of them died. Some white allies died because they were seen as race traitors, but they were at it. Mass civil disobedience, protests, organized. It took years, but it led to fundamental changes, folks. And what we're witnessing right now is a white lash. Let's keep it real. A white rage. The
Yes.
death rattle of white supremacy that's turned to a death march. They want to bring it all down. As I always say with Danielle, if it's a choice between renting a room to a Muslim and a Jew, or burning down the house, they'll burn down the village. And you could replace Muslim and Jew with black, brown, transgender, feminist, anyone who's seen as an enemy, a rhino, a Republican in name only. And what, Norm, I agree with you. And the final thing I'll say before I let you go is the institutions seems like they're going to fail us for the most part, But there are some judges, the district judges, Trump has lost 90 cases, folks. There's some people in media like Terry Moran and others who are speaking out. Terry's not stupid. He knew he'd get hit and he decided to speak out. It shows ABC's cowardice. There are people like corporations like Costco and others who said, you know what, in our bottom line, it's better to double down on DEI. And what you've seen is that the rest of us, we have power. We have our dollar. The color green trumps all other colors in America, even white. You've seen Costco's traffic go up, Target's traffic go down. As a result of the Tesla takedowns and the mass protests, you've seen Tesla stock go down. It's become toxic. You've seen, as a result of people speak out, law firms who bent the knee to Trump. Now these corporations, what we found out last week in the Wall Street Journal article, is these corporations are like, you're one of the law firms that bent the knee to Trump and offered $1 billion in pro bono work. We're not going to work with you because that makes us look bad. So I want to remind people that the dollar and our power to use and spend the dollar, and especially if people of color now, it ain't like the 60s. We have a little bit more money, folks. Use and vote with your wallet, number one. You've seen Democrats come out today. I don't know if you've seen Norm using tough language about like authoritarian and fascism because they realize, I think, Norm, that centrism ain't going to cut it. Like, we're not waiting for the Chuck Schumers and the others. We want fighters. If you're not willing to fight, get the F out. Like, I'm done with you. Like, I don't want your centrism. I don't want Ro Khanna becoming an ally with Elon Musk. You've seen Gavin Newsom realize, oh, shit, I made the wrong play. And then once he acted tough and talked tough yesterday, people are like, you go, Newsom. And then also the rally that's happening, the No Kings rally, come out, the 50-51 protests, folks. But as Norm said, you have to be smart. They are looking, they are itching for a fight. They want to use any excuse to call the Insurrection Act and call you all insurrectionists and rebels and break your skull. So it's going to take a lot of resolve and a lot of short-term and long-term strategic thinking, and remembering what our ancestors did in the civil disobedience, the peaceful protest, even as they spit on these black bodies, crack black skulls. It's a type of organized civil disobedience. And one thing I'll say, Norm, it's going to require white bodies on the front line. White bodies. This is America, right? White bodies and white faces on the front lines, no longer leaving it up to the black bodies and brown bodies being cracked and beaten. Because there is something in this country, Norm, where an unarmed white person and a white woman gets beaten up by ICE, the country reacts differently than if it's me getting beat up. I don't know if I'm wrong on this. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but I feel like it's time for white folks to step up.
What I want is to have white folks, brown folks, black folks, and all folks who believe in freedom and are appalled by this to turn out. But you're right. If there is not a substantial collection of white people joining in, then it's going to be even easier for them to move in the harshest way. And anybody who believes that they're just going to be going after brown people or just going to be going after brown and black people don't know anything about the history of movements like this in the world. All of us are in danger, and we have to step up for all of us.
Yeah.
That is what happened in the civil rights movement. We had lots of heroes who were not black, some of whom were killed, as you said. And if we don't get that across the board, then we really are doomed.
Yeah, and we need people to wake up, and we need people to speak up. And I've always said everyone has a superpower, even if you're leading with empathy. Even if you're like a stay-at-home dad or mom, the way you model yourself, your kids learn. The way you show up at school and local city councils, right? The way you speak up, folks. We have the numbers. That's what people don't realize. We have the numbers. And what a
Yes.
bully does is a bully terrorizes. He picks on one or two weak kids so everyone else stays in line.
Yeah.
But when the rest of us speak up, the bully, and these bullies, Norm, Trump has weak knees and weak jaws. These are the weakest strong men. Look at Elon Musk. Look at JD Vance. These are cowards, folks. Look at Pete Hegseth. Military is looking through, he sits there and does these Navy SEAL trainings. The military knows he's a friggin' coward and a loser. So we have to speak up. Norm, I give you the final word. And before you leave, shamelessly promote yourself.
So the piece that I wrote that was the subject of this is in the Contrarian. It's easy to find. Read it, spread it. And otherwise, I do this podcast with David Rothkopf. Today was with Miles Taylor. It'll be out soon. It is really stunning. And it's the podcast is called Words Matter. Subscribe just as you should subscribe to the Left Hook.
I owe you Venmo. I said I was gonna your check is in the mail, but the kids don't use checks. So I'll Venmo you, folks. I've been going for an hour and 10 minutes by accident. So I don't know if I said this to you, Norm. I accidentally pressed live, and then all these people joined up, and I'm like, oh shit! And instead of just simply saying, "Oh, my bad, guys," I just kept talking, and more people joined. So we have 1,600 folks who joined us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. I'm going to have Allison Gill on at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This has been The Left Hook. I've kept everything without paywall. I'm not stupid, but I am a fool. I believe citizens should be informed. That being said, you pay what you can. If you can play, please do. I'm independent. I don't think I'm going to get any invites anymore on CNN or MSNBC, and that's okay. We've built up a pretty great community here. Spread the word. Sign up to what Norm's great podcast he does with David, and check out his contrarian piece. I'm going to have this up in an hour for those who joined us late. And I'm going to link up to Norm's piece. Thank you all for watching. See you in 2 hours. But until then, and even for the rest of this hellscape, you can choose how you want to be. You can choose how you want to live. You can choose if you want to speak out. You can choose if you want to be the hero of your children's history books, or if you just want to seek short-term protection, and you'll end up like the villain. It's going to be tough, but that's okay. Every generation has had a challenge. Every generation. This is our challenge, and I think in a way, Norm, we are lucky that we have the ability to speak up and stand up and fight the good fight. Not everyone does, and so I hope you join us in fighting this good fight. Please, oh please, take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other, and don't be a fascist. See you tomorrow, Norm.
Take care, Raj.